Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we will start in next 2 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Before I start, if somebody can please let me know, am I audible and clear?
Yes, you are.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Jaspa. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone, and a very good evening. Myself, Ekta Dubey, and on behalf of the Branalytics team and our partner, Expresso.ai, we welcome you all and thank you for being part of our webinar, Scaling with MLOps. Now, before we start this webinar, there are a few guidelines that I would like to highlight and make you people aware of. Requesting all our attendees to be on mute when the speakers are taking the session. There would be a Q&A after each session where the attendees can ask the questions or share their insights, if any, with the thought leaders. The guidelines are you need to raise your hands, unmute yourself on your video, introduce yourself, and ask your question or share your insights with our audience. So to start with, I would quickly like to introduce our partner, Expresso.ai. Expresso.ai enables to manage, build, and automate the entire AI ML application lifecycle from research to production with an integrated unified platform. With security, governance, and compliance as a core foundation of the platform, Expresso.ai relieves data scientists from the concerns of DevOps and deployment, leaving them to focus on doing what they are best, building models and algorithms. A short intro why we are here today. With businesses moving towards more mature adoption of AI, the need for building more custom and tailored solutions have become critical. And as a consequences of this, an MLOps platform should be scalable to meet the requirements without compromising on the best practices of data ops, DevOps, and model management. This webinar invites views from industry practitioners and licensed MLOps platform vendors to come on one platform to discuss at length about scaling with MLOps. Today, we are here to gain expert insights from the industry leaders from South Africa, talking about what challenges does MLOps addresses, 4 critical deciding factors of an MLOps, and what to look out for in MLOps platform. Now, I take this opportunity to introduce all the thought leaders today. So I would first like to welcome Nolly Matau to speak about her. Nolly is the Executive Head of Business Intelligence, Analytics, Planning and Monitoring, First National Bank, FNB. With her over 14 years of experience in the financial services industry and a proven track record of defining and executing a data analytics strategy and of envisioning, creating, and delivering business intelligence and analytics solutions for stakeholders. Nolly is a passionate leader and a speaker in various business intelligence, analytics, artificial intelligence, and data scientist conferences. Nolly has also won the South African Women in Leadership Trailblazers Award 2020 and now also heads the South African Women in Leadership as a country head. We have Dino Bernicci, Head of Data Scientist of Home Choice International PLC. He has experience driving of AI strategy and developing production solutions for large South African corporates such as TFG, Woolworths, Standard Bank, and Chevron. He's currently the head of data scientist at Home Choice International, a home shopping and a financial services group with 1 million customers and over R3 billions in annual revenues. In Dino's spare times, he consults on the development of course content for Andrew Ng's deeplearning.ai and co-founded FakerFace, a company developing AI-powered creative apps, fakerface.ai. We have Mr. Ruan Vonneberg, Chief Information Officer, Africa at Rand Merchant Bank. He's a highly qualified entrepreneurial manager offering more than 10 years of program, portfolio, project, business management, and has more than 20 years of technical experience with financial, medical, and media industry. We have speakers from Expresso.ai, Mr. R. Krishna Kumar, having over 25 years of experience with proven expertise in architecting large systems and designing enterprise-wide solutions for data management. And Mr. Jaspal Singh Karoon, VP Market Development, having 20 years of cross-functional experience with startups and mid-sized companies. So now I would like to hand over to Mr. Jaspal to take this session forward. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Ekta, and good evening, everyone. So we planned this session in a way that, we'd like to cover it in 4 parts. One is we would like to understand while the speakers will introduce themselves and how they understand MLOps, how they are related to AI, ML, and what has been their understanding, what kind of challenges they have faced. Then we would like to understand what is it that a good MLOps should cover. So we cover some technical aspects, and of course we cover the talent challenges as well. Once this 2 parts are over, we'll give a very brief, around 10 minutes on the best practices that we try to incorporate in Expresso via a short demo of not extending 10 to 15 minutes. And then we talk about the future of MLOps and then taking questions from the attendees. So to start with, I'll start with KK. That KK, what has been your experience and how do you come to know and understand and develop MLOps, and why was it needed? And then I'd like to hear it from Dino and Ruan and then Nali as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jaspal. Thanks, Ekta. So pleasure to be here today with a very, very distinguished panel. Thank you for attending, all of you. So MLOps is kind of a buzzword nowadays because everyone is talking about it. And the reason for this is that data science, AI, ML is finally moving out of research labs into production systems. So everyone is concerned about how these models which have been developed in labs will now work in actual production systems. So there are a lot of challenges, and this is what MLOps tools aim to do. They aim to take models which have been developed in the labs, which are working well in terms of accuracy prediction, and then move them to places where they're supposed to serve thousands of requests a second. So there are a lot of challenges along the way. And I'm sure my fellow panelists will add their views on what ideal MLOps platforms should have. But from my point of view, and again, considering my journey and considering the kind of companies that we have worked for, we are a services company. Expresso.ai is a product that has come out of our labs. And because we deal with analytics services, my viewpoint or my background is of project management. So what we've tried to do, and I think one of the main concerns or one of the main properties of an MLOps tool should be a discipline. So the whole data science is sometimes, I've heard customers describing it as the Wild West because data scientists typically take, Python notebooks and they code them up in a monolithic manner, and that doesn't translate well to production systems at all. So there are benefits of software engineering. Software engineering practices, best practices have been around for 30, 40 years. So those benefits should percolate to data science. And that's one of the objectives I would have when I look at MLOps tools. So for example, just talking about architecture, software architecture, talking about modular design, all those concepts should really come into MLOps. Then again, there are features like in software engineering projects, code versioning is a pretty standard concept. Everybody knows, how to check in and check out code. So you need the same thing with data. You need the same thing with models, the ability to version data, version different models that you're committing into the system. So that's again a discipline which needs to come in, and MLOps tools should really help to build that discipline. And finally, traceability. All data scientists run dozens, if not hundreds of experiments. So the ability to be able to trace each experiment and make sure that you can reproduce them whenever you want, and be able to track those experiments and know which ones are good, which ones are not so good. So that's an integral part of the whole MLOps journey. And finally, teamwork. No data science team or person works in isolation. So any MLOps tool should really have tools available for collaboration, for enabling people to review each other's work, and finally introduce best practices. So that's my take, Jaspal.
So I think you clearly give a very solutions perspective to the MLOps. I think, Dino, it's your turn. Please help us with your inputs. What's your background and how you got into it, and what has been your approach?
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me here. So my background is actually from a consulting point of view. So I was at a company called 8020, which is an analytics consulting company, consulting into the likes of TFG, Woolworths, Standard Bank. And we had a lot of data science analytics projects for these clients. And what we found is we were repeating a lot of work. Lots of clients want propensity models. We found that we were repeating those standard data pipelines, those standard model pipelines. And we thought, there must be a better way to do this. I kind of parted ways with the consulting company before we found a solution to that problem. But when I went to Home Choice and I started with my colleague, Carl Taylor, who I'm still working with, we said there has to be a better way to do this. It doesn't make sense to have so many resources running these models in production. So we did some investigation and we found some vendors that, back in 2018, they did support this, but none of them had a complete picture of the entire workflow. So we did our research. We took a lot of inspiration from Uber, and we sort of built our own AutoML and production pipeline. Sticky tape everywhere and matchsticks holding stuff up, but it was functional. And we sort of used that to leverage the small number of people in the team to roll out a lot of solutions into production. So that's my experience from it. And then just growing that solution over time has been a lot of fun. And it's very interesting to see now kind of where this whole MLOps has progressed from. It was very much in its infancy back then, and now you have companies that are dedicated to helping larger corporations actually implement that stuff.
Good. Yeah, that has been an approach. So I think we have something called, the open source options. Then we have, broadly, we look at it at Expresso from 3 points. That is, one is cloud native service providers who are into MLOps. We have open source guys. And then we have the proprietary ones who are more like cloud agnostic. And then, they are more like, either standalone, they cover one particular component of MLOps. And there are some who, are like end-to-end into the solutioning. And then, again, a classification would be more like focusing only on the structured data and AutoML and that kind of a category. And then there are something which is more on the unstructured data, requiring a lot of writing, actually not the citizen data scientist, but for a data scientist who likes to write its own algorithm, develops its own customized pipelines, and and only the operational challenges are automated for him. The repeatability is minimized so that he's able to focus on the model building. So I'll request Ruan to share his views, and then maybe we can have Nolly to speak about that as well.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I was hoping Nolly was going to go first because we're from the same banking group. Yeah. And I wanted to get her views first. I only joined because now I can actually meet her, because when we work together, we can't meet. Yeah, so look, from the banking side, and I think, Dino, you said it's fun. We don't have a lot of fun. Everything is governed to death. So ML in itself is a bit of a problem for us because we struggle with, well, let me just back up, so the definition in my mind, and I would like to get opinions on this, on ML, so data and decision-making is typically based on a hypothesis. This is the decision I'm going to implement, and we're going to code it, and we're going to run with that. and I can explain it. With ML, we start without an hypothesis. We try to figure something out. For instance, we've got balance of payment codes that come in on payments. So when you make a payment, I send a gift to Dino or to Nolly or to Jaspel. I put a code, a 410 code on that payment to say it's a gift, and that's for the government. When those payments come in, they don't have those codes because other banks don't know what our codes are. So we tried to do this decisioning thing. We couldn't figure it out. We took 500,000 records. We let the ML algorithm, a Bayesian approach, loose on it. It gave us the parameters. But now the data changes a little bit, and now suddenly this thing starts giving the wrong parameters. How do you pick that up? That's one of our big concerns. And then look, we're a bank. We're an investment bank. We do, and Ollie is on the transactional side. I'm on the investment side. So we do a lot of foreign forex transactions, those type of things. We build models. We know about backtesting. So if there's a solution out there where I can backtest my ML solution and then move it into operations, into production, that'll be worth a lot. Because that's always our big thing, is that if we don't start with an hypothesis, how do I prove it's right? And then how do I prove in 3 months' time it's still right? So those are the big questions. So we've got quite a few. So as I say, we've got the Bob code implementation that's working well for us. We're looking at, I don't know who knows about Bloomberg chats. You know, when the dealers chat with each other, they've got the short code that they type to each other. You can't figure it out, but actually they just traded $500,000 or something. So we feed those chats into a model, and we're making sense from that. We're trying to turn that into structured data so that we can record it. And then one thing that's, you know, it's always easy to prove something. It's when it's not provable. So we do odd behavior monitoring. You know, when somebody does something a little bit out of the ordinary. So we're using some machine learning algorithms for that. When it's hard to code, you know, for if then that scenario for odd behavior. So yeah, look, we're struggling with the deployment part. You know, we've got a lot of things in the pipeline and dev trying to get them into production, but the governance around it in the banking world is tight. So very interested to hear the panel's views on and solutions on how to do this. And even Dino, you know, your sticky tape and matchsticks, I would like to understand how that works.
Good. Rohan, I think KK may have an input, and even Dino, and then we go to Nolly because you have a question. I agree that, you know, usually in business, of course, we start with a hypothesis, but it is the use case and then defining the hypothesis. What is it that we're trying to identify? So I think there is the core of statistics is always there in machine learning, because, you know, it is always a model which is trying to predict the data. But I think KK is the right guy to, you know, because he's been the engineer behind Expresso, he's built it up, and he's built it up from a solutions perspective, not like a tech platform, you know, that, you know, we give you a tech platform and then we promise you something of that sort. But given his years of experience, you know, your production challenges or your pipeline building, I think KK may have an input to share.
Yes, Jasper, thank you. So yeah, very quickly, because I do want to hear from Nolly, her views on what, you know, MLOps is all about. Absolutely, Ron. The key to having this whole system in place is flexibility and the ability to quickly test. You talked about backtesting. So the ability to quickly deploy things on a dev environment, test them out, you know, and then promote them. And that's what I talked about, you know, good software engineering practices. And flexibility and what Dino mentioned in terms of modularity, you know, the ability to repeat things. Everybody is doing the same thing. You should have that in a library. So you should be able to quickly piece together things, put them in your QA system, test them out, and then deploy them. So that is very key to this entire process. And that's what we've tried to do. And again, using the same sticky tape that Dino talked about, all our stuff is built on open source components, which is what makes our, us able to firstly be very agile and low in cost. So some inputs, Jaspal, and then we can continue this. But I want to hear from Nolly perhaps.
Yeah.
I have a good use case for you after Nolly has had a chance.
Sure. Request Nolly to please. Yeah, Nolly.
Evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this invite. I think Dino and Rowan actually hit it on the head and addressed some of the issues that we also had on our side. So I think, as you all know, typically ML involves a number of roles, right, working together, whether it's the data scientists, software engineers, analysts, project managers. And because of all these moving parts and interdependencies, cross-team communication became something that was very important to us. Then the other issue was with regards to where individuals have their experiments or the models on their own machines. So we were actually looking for a shared communal space, which enables access for the entire team and would also help in facilitating to easily bring up someone's work whenever needed. And I think also critically important was for non-technical stakeholders and other business leaders to be able to view on the fly the project, its progress and its status and potential, and also be able to see from a shared space where to view and review the experiments, and what would actually then help them to actually make better decisions on the fly. But I think more importantly, our driving force behind us actually looking at one ML platform was the multiple languages and multiple teams that were actually using these models. From an F&B perspective, I don't know from Ruan's side, from an RMB, F&B has over 1,300 strong data community. And if everybody's going off doing their own thing, then we're actually working in silos. So as a bank, we actually then took a decision end of last year to actually have one ML platform where the entire bank would then actually be utilizing that specific vendor, because different units were actually using different vendors. I don't want to name names. So we then decided as a bank that the entire bank would then all be using that one platform, where we'd then actually be addressing these multiple languages and multiple teams building these models. Another issue is where models are sent to IT and they're not making it into production. And I think that is a frustration for a lot of teams where a lot of models aren't productionalized. I think close to 75% of the models that are actually built end up not being productionalized. And then also having to rewrite some of those models into similar languages for deployment, or one language for deployment. And then there's also a huge backlog for models waiting to be deployed. So we actually decided then to create a standardized process for evaluating models and for the deployment and productionalization of models. So that's why we chose the one vendor. The entire bank was then going on a journey from a training perspective on that platform, so that that entire community of 1,300 individuals were actually trained on all its features, so that we would then be able to operationalize it and use its efficiencies for our model building. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, Nolly, you have talked about two very relevant points. I think, cross-functional team is very critical. And, data scientist by nature is somebody who is, wants an autonomy to innovate. But he may not be the right guy to understand what the business is asking for. So he needs the gap or the use case to be outlined in a way which he understands. So I think, yeah, of course, there is always a challenge between balancing what is the organization strategy and what is it that we are trying to achieve, and how is that, we are giving the autonomy. And of course, there should be a centralized workplace, because, siloed working always creates a challenge. So we have one of our customers in UK who is from financial services business, and, exactly they had the same challenge that, we have large teams who are working in silos, and, we need something which we can, come together and, they can collaborate. They can exchange their learnings, one particular component code, or, making it reusable as well. So that repeatability that Dino talked about is also taken care of. So I think they're pretty insightful input from your side, Nolly. So to take forward the discussion before we move to, what is it that there should be an MLOps, and I think I understand if FNB is having an MLOps platform, you'll have more specific inputs on what are the existing challenges that you face, and then maybe we can hear from the other panel members. But before touching on, I think Rohan, you had a few more points. So one is, what is the talent situation? Because South Africa market is new for us, for Expresso team, because we have customers in US primarily, and we don't understand what is the talent gap. Are there any challenges? Because we face the challenges of the data scientists not being available in the right skill set, and and there is high demand for them. So how was this, the 1300 data scientist team community, trained, and what are the talent gaps that you see? Because if there's a steep learning curve in adopting an MLOps platform, then that is going to be a recurring cost, because you have a very high attrition rate for this community. The guys come in and move out because they get better opportunities. So steep learning curve is one of the, the bottleneck when we go for the MLOps. So on this point, I think, Nolly, if you can just extend your inputs further, and then maybe we go back to Dino and Rohan for further inputs.
Apologies for my video. So with regards to the bank, what we actually noted was, with regards to the roles, is a lot of the guys within that data community I spoke about of 1,300 individuals were actually double hatting. So what we actually did then towards the end of last year, middle of last year, was to actually do a skills audit, to actually then identify in that entire community what skills that entire community actually has, so that we could then actually place the right individuals in the right teams to actually do the right work in order to then actually create efficiencies. So long story short, what we would also realize is, in our environment, we were calling them quant analysts or quantitative analysts, where in other organizations, they were called data scientists. And when you were actually then having vacancies, a lot of the guys weren't actually getting enough CVs, because people would prefer to be called the data scientist than an actual quant analyst. So after doing this audit, we then decided, literally, we're in July now. Yeah, we're in July. Beginning of May, the entire bank then decided to scrap the role of a quant analyst. They are all now known as data scientists. So we had this whole exercise done with HR, where we were actually clear on the roles, on the responsibilities of our data scientists going forward. And yes, there's definitely a shortage. I think the one thing we've actually realized is, this skill and where the future is actually going, there's a huge requirement for data scientists. And we do a lot of poaching internally to fill the vacancies that we have. And I don't know how Rohan or Dino feels about it, but I think generally in South Africa, there is a shortage of skilled and experienced data scientists. And the other thing is, people like the term data scientist and they name themselves that. But when you're actually going through the CVs and what that person actually does, they aren't a true data scientist. It's just liking the role and the term. So for us, we're still, at my team, I literally have 5 vacancies at the moment. So I am looking. So if you guys know of any great data scientists, please bring them my way. That are very skilled. So that's the one thing we're definitely looking for.
Nolly, we have 100+ on roles, so a couple of them can go to you.
Please, I'll appreciate that.
Good. I think, yeah, that's a very, very relevant point that you highlighted. And so going back to Dino now, Dino, what is it that you are looking for in an MLOps? Because, Rohan had a question on, challenges of, putting into production and then, going back and forth, because there's an iterative nature to the solution. That is what I think Rohan was trying to indicate. So maybe your feedback, your inputs on, ideally, what are those critical decision-making factors when choosing for an MLOps platform? So one is, does the size of a vendor matter, or is it that, that 2 months of POC is enough to, understand whether this is suitable, or, what are those parameters? You are looking for flexibility, you are looking for features. So, you talked about, whether there should be, auto ML components or what. So I'll request your inputs on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, in my opinion, the most important thing is how comprehensive is that solution? So what I've found interacting with a lot of vendors is the focus is very much on the AutoML side of it. So how do we engineer a model? How do we train a model? And then how do we put it into production? But there's a lot of systems that sit around that process. And I think the more that you create models, the more you realize the value actually doesn't sit with the model. It's very easy to create a model and train a model. You can do that in a few hours. The value actually sits around that entire ecosystem of getting the model into production, making sure that it's adding value. Because if you don't productionize the model, like Noli said, if 75% of your models are sitting waiting to be productionized, there's no value added there, but you paid the development costs for those models. So in my opinion, when you look at a vendor, you want the full end-to-end spectrum, and there's a lot of things that the vendors are missing. So in my opinion, feature stores. So you engineer features, which takes a lot of time, and then that is not shared with the rest of your data community or data scientists. So a feature store for me is very important, because you want to create features once, and then you can pump that into multiple different models. And that's what we did. Is we looked at Uber. They have a Michelangelo system. They wrote a lot of white papers around how they engineered their feature store. And we took inspiration from that so that we could spend a lot of time initially engineering features, but then in the future, when we develop new models, we don't have to engineer features. We can just go to the feature store and say, hey, give me customer features, give me transactional features, and give me bad rates, because I want to predict the probability that this customer is going to pay us or not. And then that's it. Then you can execute the model. So I think the vendors have a lot of focus on AutoML and model repositories, like saving the models, artifacting, the model artifacts are saved. And then some of them are strong, some of them are weak in deployment. Deployment is obviously key, because if you don't deploy it, it's not going to add value for you. And you want to sort of standardize that deployment so that it's easier for business to integrate it. Because that's also a big challenge. If every deployment needs its own special integration path, then you're obviously going to be slowing down your deployments. And then the last thing, which I think is often overlooked, is the calculation of the impact of the solution. So what we do is we have an uplift calculation engine, which we just called it that because we didn't know what else to call it. But it's a system that allows us to standardize our testing. So if we do deploy a model into production, even if that model is not live, it's shadow scoring customers. So that's something that we would often do with a credit scorecard. We would train, develop it, deploy it, but it's not actually being used to make credit decisions, but it's living in the background. It's scoring customers, shadow score customers, or it could be really scoring customers. And then this uplift calculation engine would design the A/B test or the design of experiments, and would make sure that you're looking at similar customers, and then actually calculate what's the behavioral impact from implementing the solution. So then, that would then feed into your finance team. You can calculate profits, ROI on the solutions. And that, in my opinion, is often quite missed in these platforms.
Yeah, pretty relevant. KK, you'll have something to add?
Yes, sure. So just taking off on what Noli and Dino mentioned, I think Noli mentioned, when you have a large team, 1,300 data scientists, and all of them with different skills, etc., to get them to collaborate on a platform, that's exactly where you need very strong processes, right? So your platform should be able to have these inbuilt processes to enable that kind of collaboration, and the way that people pass on the baton to each other, the data scientist to the data engineer, and so on. And incidentally, I think, you're absolutely right, Noli. The quant analyst versus data scientist, that's a world of a difference in terms of trying to attract the right talent, right? A rose by any other name definitely does smell sweeter, I think, at least in this situation. So, yeah, so this is exactly, it's becoming, data science is becoming mainstream. AI, ML, all these are becoming mainstream. So you need to apply the rigor of software engineering to this. And even 1,300 people, you must be having, 5 people walking out and in each month. So how do you train them? How do you get them to understand? How do you get people to code according to a standard so that it becomes easier for knowledge transfer when people join and leave the team? How do you enable people who code in R, people who code in Python, people who code in Scala, people who want to use Spark, who don't want to use Spark, all of them on the same platform. This is what you need so that everybody is working together and not, in silos, like you mentioned. Yeah, so those are some of my thoughts, Jaspal.
So I go back to Ron. The good thing about the discussion till now, some 30 minutes we have spent, is that we have not talked about the data. Usually, while data is important, and I was looking at the important variables for getting the right solution, data takes away the 15, 20, 25% criteria, and always the discussion tends to drift towards data, and then we get lost into that discussion that the labeling is not there, and multiple data sources and all those challenges. But now, because we have representation, Ron, you are there from Grand Merchant Bank, and data is not a challenge with you because you have the data which is real time kind of, and so what kind of a data architecture or the kind of a system which is ready for using ML. So anything from your experience, or in case you can talk specific about your bank, maybe that would set a good context for all of us.
Yeah, look, but just very quickly on your the skills in South Africa. So I think we've got the best data scientists in the world. They just all sit in Canada, unfortunately. They've all left us. No, data. So I'm going to talk on behalf of Knowledge here, because Land Merchant we're an investment bank, so we don't have large data. FNB, they've got the large data. Now, one of the things that we're helping FNB with, so our teams and FNB as partners, so we're all the same group, but we are different companies. So we do get anonymized credit card information. So we can predict the way the economy is going before the economists know it. So I can see, especially now in a pandemic, where the reaction is quite severe. As we go in and out of lockdown, so into lockdown is quite easy. All the transactions move to online, and we see that. Out of lockdown, we can see the transactions moving into the shopping centers, and we see that on a daily basis. I mean, on a real-time basis. It's not 3 months later we say we're in a recession and everybody on the ground say, yeah, we knew that 3 months ago. We can now start predicting where the flow is going, not just on the transaction, but on the transaction sizes, on what items is being bought. We get some indication on that, where it's being spent. So those type of information, we get a lot of data, and there's a lot of models being built around that to try and make sense of that data. But the question always with data, and this goes back to my earlier point of an hypothesis, we're starting to realize that the question is more important than the answer. Dino said, we can build a model really quickly. My guys can sit one day and build this model if they've got the data, coming up with the right questions, which in our IT world we call use cases. That's the challenge. And that's really where we start looking at ML to actually define those use cases for us. To say, oh, I found this. You maybe should want to go look at that further. So yeah, but data, look, data is not so much of a problem for us anymore. It's throughout the bank, it's become a priority for everyone to ensure the quality of the data. We've got new data lakes being put in place on F&B side, so all the data is being consolidated. So in and out quality data. It's a few years ago it was the big drive. I think we're getting to the point where it's now a solid ingredient into MLOps or whatever else we're building now.
Okay, great. So I think, Ron, you have a right question. And I think what I'll request is we have Sunit from US, who is part of our product team. He's leading the product team. he would give a quick demo of kind of an espresso so that, and please feel free to ask questions there. I'm sure you're going to have some questions. And I think, Ruan, the core is that, understanding what is the problem or asking the right question is something which is, that is where the experience comes in. I may be the best data scientist, but if I can't hear out what Ruan is trying to suggest, and usually, people try to adopt use cases. There's something on fraud prevention. There is a vendor who has done something. Let us try and do it. That should not be the case. And that's where, picking up the clue from Dino is that, auto ML is not the right way to do it, because that is not the only challenge, because every business is unique, even if it is fraud prevention or fraud detection, which is kind of common in insurance and in financial services business. You have your own nature of data. You have your own inherent processes. So you have to be very sensitive about what are those variables going into your algorithm to, foresee and forecast. And that is where the control aspect comes in, because that is when you put into the production, the accuracy should be what you were having it at the training level. So I will request my colleague Suneet to give you a very broad overview, but it is just like you should be interrupting and you should be asking your questions. And I think in a way we'll be able to address some of your challenges, Nolly, from your whatever the existing is there, in case you find some answers from there. Dino, in case you are having some, please feel free to interrupt during that 10-15 minute of interaction, and then we move to the next phase of our discussion. So we'll be focusing on the best practice. So if you're there, yeah.
Yeah, I'm there. I hope you guys can hear me well. Hi, everyone. And it's great to be among the speakers, and thank you for having me on the on this session. So yeah, let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Sunit and Sushil. I've been I work closely with KK Krishna Kumar on the Espresso platform, and I'm based out of the US, California, and I'm having 10 plus years. I've been in the industry of analytics for the last 7-8 years, and while I've been associated with Zoom, that basically. So yeah, and I'm not making it more kind of thing. So I'll just try and walk you through, what we have in Espresso right now. How do we, bring about some of the best practices of collaboration, of versioning, and yeah. So let's go through, and just as Jaspal said, please feel free to interrupt me at any point of time. And you can see my screen. I hope, Jaspal, I hope it is.
Yeah, so we can see you, but you are breaking in between. So it's better if you switch off your camera.
Video, yeah. Let me just switch off my video. I hope it's much better. Apologize for that. The internet has been a little unstable in my area. They're doing some construction work near my home, so please bear with me if there are some stoppages. Jaspal just fill in, and KK is obviously there, so he knows the product very well, so he can also fill in. So with Espresso, as KK was, when he started the conversation, he was like, about bringing in the best practices, bringing in collaboration, bringing the teams together to do work under one unified platform, right? And that is what Espresso is designed to build. Jaspal might have given you a quick background, or if I'm just repeating myself, please excuse me. But this was built for our need. So when we started Espresso, it was, we wanted a unified platform for our data scientists and our data engineers to work together and build and bring some uniformity, some structure, some organization to how we handle data science, and how we take, how we build models, how we take those models into production, and so on, all the surrounding dependencies and the infrastructure that is involved there, right? So this is we started the journey with the CLI based command, and KK will know that very well. We had but we matured over time, and now we have a very nice interactive user interface. So this is the control center that we call it, the centralized control management system, which again, with a single sign-on, yeah, everyone, please go ahead.
Yes. So yeah, I thought the screen wasn't refreshing, but now it is.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, just let me know if my screen, just kind of freezes over. So yeah. So, once you log in, so it is a single sign-on. So, and we have role-based access. So, depending on what role do you play in your team, you can be given access to specific task. And this is a overview of all the projects that I have been given access to. Some I might be working as a data scientist, some might be working as a data engineer. In some case, I just might be a project manager, or a program manager trying to take a look at, different how my team is performing. So, again, separating out while also bringing in, collaboration among the team. So let me just go into one of the projects, or what we call in Expresso is a solution, right? It's pretty much same as the project, but we call it like an AI solution, right? So, you can see this is the workspace. This is the, workspace for every project or every solution that we have. And on the left-hand side, you can see there are broadly 4 categories. Activities is something that is just managing activities. So we have the workspace. Workspace is where you build and design and architect your solution in terms of components and pipelines. And I'm sure, most of you might be familiar with that. Component, again, while I'm trying to explain this, these are some of the advantages. Components, again, modularizing your code, right? Making sure that your code is modular enough so that, I see 2 advantages, and these are my thoughts is, one is obviously the reusability. So if you write a code and you modularize it, and you have some specific inputs, some specific output coming off a particular component, you can reuse that component. And so there's a reusability factor in it. And the second is obviously the replaceability, right? So that when you have a better code, or you have something better to do. Suppose, for example, in this, there's a data cleaner component. So today you're doing data cleaning in a specific method, or you have some specific algorithms for them. But tomorrow you bring in something new, right, or something different, something better. So it becomes easy rather than writing a monolithic code where you go from top to bottom. And when you want to bring in something new, there's a lot of changes that is required in the code, and that takes a lot of time for data scientists. So these are some of the, again, as I said, some of the best practices that we're trying to. So we encourage our users to modularize the code, divide them into components. And similarly, let me just show you a pipeline, right? So this is a typical data science pipeline, where you start with the fetching the data, cleaning the data, transforming. And we'll talk about versioning in more detail. Then you're training your model, evaluating your model. So, again, this creating pipelines also, give you the ability to reuse this pipeline and perform multiple experiments at multiple, with multiple data, with, different types of data, different types of parameters. So, this is, again, workspace is just a designing solution you architect. So you have an overview of what your solution is going to look like, and how you can conduct experiments, how you divide your code, right? And as KK was saying, some of the best practices that we're trying to incorporate is, bringing more uniformity and structure to how you write your code. So what, when you create, and we have a close integration with Jupyter as well as GitLab, right? So let me just quickly show you, on the top, you can see there's a GitLab and a Jupyter Hub. Yeah, let me show you example of a GitLab. So when you create a project, and when you create a specific component, right? Every component, this is automatically done. So you'll have a folder structure for every component that you create. And when you go into a specific component, again, you have a very standard way of, putting your folder structure, your app, your code goes into your app, your config files goes into your config, your requirements, your Python libraries, the data that, or the, whatever what are the dependencies, the requirements that you need for that particular code goes into requirements. Your unit test goes into tests. So again, bringing the standard best practices, organizing your code, so that when a new data scientist comes, if you have a uniformity in your organization, that okay, this is how everyone writes code, or at least code, not even write code, at least organize the code in a specific structure. It's just easy to do knowledge transfer, right? And also what we, when you create a component, and we have different component types, it could be a service, it could be a job, it could be a, inference service, it could be a database. Either way, we have some, when you create a code, when you create a component, you get some, what we call is the skeleton code, right? Something to get started at. something to give you organization at. So there is a specific format that you follow. There are specific functions, specific methods that you put your code into. And again, this is again the whole idea is to bring about a uniformity, a structure, and a better knowledge transfer amongst your teammates, right? So this is how we are trying to incorporate some of the best practices to bring some organization to how people are writing code. And obviously, this is object-oriented coding, right? In terms of Jupyter Notebook, you have, you just code from top to bottom, you do experiments. But again, it's as most of I think KK or I think Dino was mentioning, it's about taking that into production just does not work when you're just doing some experiments on some Jupyter Notebook or those things. So to bring a structure, to make it object oriented, to make it functional, to make it production ready, these are some of the best practices that we have incorporated directly into Espresso. That way, it gives you that flexibility, right? So this is one of the things. Other one is your obviously your Jupyter Notebook, right? So again, the same, you have a folder structure, so you can share your Jupyter Notebooks. Again, you have only those people who have access to your projects will have access to that particular folder. So you can, you have the security between projects. Plus, you can, once you are inside, you can share your notebooks. You can create notebooks. You can share data. How you use your Jupyter, because we should not disregard Jupyter, because that's one of the best one of the most favorite tools of data scientists, and that's how we have bought, right? There's other thing that I just wanted to quickly show is give me a second, is also we have a special type of component which is called the Jupyter. In that, what happens is, again, it gives you a similar folder structure, and also it has a close integration with GitLab, right? So if you write your code in Jupyter Notebook, you do your coding structure, you do your experimentations, and with a single click, right on the top, if you can see, in the single clicks, you can actually push this notebook directly into GitLab, and similarly pull code. So the code versioning system, the the organization, everything is, we're trying to, obviously, while we are trying to incorporate the best practices, we are also trying to make the life of data scientists easier as we go along, right? So these are some of the features that I wanted to highlight. Just going back.
I'll just interrupt.
Yeah, let's take a pause. Right, yeah.
While we may not go for a full demo kind of a thing, but because the attendees would be more interested in a technical demo, but we will be more. So for example, what we did is that while finding a right question, thinking of it as a component is something which is very easy to understand. So when we break the problem into smaller components, that okay, how is it to be done? I think Dino can appreciate that fact that if you have drag and drop, you have something like a single workplace where you are able to monitor the activities. Sunit, if you could quickly, because Nolly had that point that the management wants to quickly review what is happening where, a quick comparison of the model, or maybe who's working where, what is the progress happening, that project management insights, which I think even Dino talked about. That
sure. So that, right? So you have.
I'm not breaking your flow, but I just wanted to make it more interactive as well. Yeah.
No, Jaspal, I understand. Sometimes I do get into that mood where you just go on, right? But thanks, Jaspal. So this is one of this is the dashboard. So this gives you an overview of what your project is looking like, how many components you have, what is the type of components you have distributed, how many experiments you have done, how many pipelines you have created, what environments are they running on, and right now there is no experiment here, but again, a number of experiments in the last month, so again, this is configurable. So, depending on what a project manager would want, we can, configure this and make it available. You may be interested in understanding who's working on what particular experiment, those kind of graph charts. So this, this dashboard, I would say, gives you an overview from a project management or from a business user to understand how your project is, how your solution in this case is coming along, right? And what the different types of distributions are there. So again, from a project manager's perspective, everything is there, right? And one thing I just wanted to just wanted to point out before, like a wrap up, is the second, while collaboration, being organization is, some of the things that we have, and the bringing the best practices of software engineering into Espresso is there. There's a very important aspect, and I think most of you have mentioned that in your conversation, is about making traceability, right? Is how you make sure that everything that you do is traceable, right? And that we do with our versioning system. Everything in Espresso is versioned, right? Starting from your data, right? We have a data repository where you have a Git-like structure, where you can version your data, understand, you can have multiple commits. So it's similar to what Git is. You have a data set, you have multiple commits inside every commit you have. In terms of DevOps, every build that you do, every Docker container that you create, again, is versioned. You can see the latest version 3, 2, 6 version. So everything, the deployments that you do, the experiments that you run, the models actually, we also, the model versioning, right? Models that you have created, everything is versioned, and it is very easy to trace back. So if you want to trace back an experiment, it's pretty straightforward to understand. Okay, this experiment ran with this set of data, with this set of parameters, and produced this kind of output with this kind of accuracy, right? So these are some of the factors which help people or data science take decisions quicker. And this is again one of the best practices that we have bought and we have incorporated in Espresso. Everything that you do in within this is versioned, is stored. You never lose track of anything. Sometimes a failed experiment is also useful, right? Because maybe later at some point of time it might be useful, or it could be nowadays, the best way data scientists work is, they just run some experiments, store it in some Excel file, and then it just get lost in the whole transaction. But with a unified platform such as Espresso, it's very essential that you bring about that the versioning system, so that you can trace and you can do the model lineage in that case, and make sure that you have track of everything, right?
Yeah. So Ruan, you had a question that, when we work on the model and then, there is some changes happens, and then, we have to redo the model and we don't know what is happening. So in that case, there is so this is an end-to-end, the Espresso for us is an end-to-end. So it's a complete model monitoring and a model explainability. We cover that. So Ruan, coming back to your question is that, you all about that. So here, what with versioning, it is very easy to identify which data source was used, who was the data scientist working, what was the changes in the algorithm or the model that they were playing, what are the parameters, how they have changed, so that, that change could be understood. So understanding the problem is very critical. So that is what is facilitated from a technical perspective. Anyone who is looking out for an outcome is not getting the desired outcome. The team will be able to, identify and, suggest what is to be done there. And so Sunil, we have something. So what I would request, KK, if you can, come in and you can just outline, so how we have built this, because, we talked about flexibility, Dino talked about flexibility, Ruan talked about, that, it should be something which is, easily, implementable. The efficacy of the output is better. And then Nolly talked about the centralized. So how have we put it across? Because, there are three things. One is, the cloud native thing, then we have the proprietary, and then we have the open source. So where is Espresso? And then maybe we'll have some questions from the attendees and the guests speakers.
So, from the beginning, as I mentioned, our philosophy has been provide best practices. So software engineering best practices have gone into this. B, provide tools for collaboration, provide tools for everybody in the team. So data scientists, data engineers, etc. And third, I would say is we have built this completely out of open source components. So that's why we are able to, we've stitched together about 25, 27 different pieces of software. There is Kubernetes, Spark, Kubeflow, Docker, Jenkins, you name the technology, it's all inside Espresso. We've stitched them all together. And that's why we're able to offer it at a reasonable cost to our customers. We can install it on different cloud platforms, and we can install it on-prem as well. So those are some of the thoughts that have gone into building this. It's been in development for nearly 3 years now. And we tested it on our own, we, as the saying goes, we ate our own dog food first, and after that we've kind of provided to our customers. Yeah,
but we can't see you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I had switched off my video.
Okay. Dino, you had a question?
Yeah. I think there are a few questions just on the chat, or Dino, please go ahead. We can.
I'm sorry. We also have Noli raising her hands. Yeah. Sorry, Dino. Please carry on.
No, Noli, please go first.
Okay, thank you, Dino. So model training and retraining can eat up a good chunk of productive time if you're constantly scheduling it manually, plus provisioning the needed data and the infrastructure for those jobs. What I noticed is a lot of MLOps platforms don't come with pre-made training pipelines. So that's what I wanted to actually ask, if Expresso does have training pipelines, because that would actually make life a lot easier.
So we support training pipelines. You saw how you can actually create a training pipeline from individual components very easily. And some of those components are actually available as what we call our library. So we support, for example, most of the popular machine learning libraries. We have specialized components for them. So, provide some extra features like scikit-learn, Keras, XGBoost, and so on and so forth. So you can, for example, create pipelines and then save them as in the library so that your team can then reuse them. So suppose you have the same training pipeline, you can store it and reuse it. You can schedule training runs as well. I don't know if Sunit managed to show that, but you can schedule something. If your data comes in at 10 a.m. every day, you can say run my training every day at 11 a.m. for example. So all that is possible in Expresso.
Okay, thank you.
It's
Sorry,
auto.
Dino, you can go ahead.
Yeah, Dino, please go ahead.
So I just had a question around the feature engineering and the feature store. So for us, that's where a lot of time is spent. So training pipelines, model pipelines, deployment pipelines, once you've set it up once, it's pretty easy to set that to run periodically or performance-based, so if your training drops off the cliff or manually based, but in terms of features and feature stores, that's always a big time user of ours. I mean, what do you guys think of that?
Oh, absolutely. We have been looking at integrating feature stores. I know there are a lot of very good, Hopworks, Feast. There's lots of open source and various tools out there. So that's definitely on our roadmap, Dino. But the way we look at it, right, we are an analytics services company, and we have clients in healthcare, we have clients in retail, we have clients in financial services, etc. So a feature store is very beneficial to organizations like yours, which are essentially dealing with the same kind of data, day in and day out, right? You have all the teams are together working on the same kind of data. So that's the reason we haven't done it yet, but definitely it's on the roadmap for us to integrate with Expresso.
Sorry, KK.
Sure.
Can I ask something?
Yes, absolutely.
Clearly, I work for a bank, so security is an important
Yes.
aspect for us. So I wanted to understand, what overarching security facets do you guys have to protect our assets, our data assets?
Sure, very good question. So firstly, we, for organizations like yours, like banks and healthcare companies, which are very, very, paranoid about data security, we would install this on-prem. So we, all we need is some VM. So we would install it on your private cloud or on-prem, your data center, etc. And then we do provide a VPN around it so that also enhances the security. Then we have data encryption in place. Obviously data is encrypted while in motion, but it's also, you could take it encrypted, the entire disk can be encrypted, etc. So we have all that in place, very stringent security measures for organizations which need it. In fact, one of our clients, like Jaspal mentioned, it's an investment bank in the UK, and they have an extremely secure setup where we have multiple levels of authentication to even get into the system. So depending on you, we could customize them.
Thank you.
And that's one of the, I think, one of the beauties is that, we have made software modular itself, right? So our software is also modular as we are trying to bring the best practices, and it's easily configurable, and depending on business needs, depending on how how you are how does your organization do, we try to incorporate them rather than have our some specific things. While we have the some of the standard tools for security, like LDAP, and we have integrations with all the security features, but it does happen that we have to, for example, the one that we went for the financial, they had a huge round. We had I think 2 months, right, KK, almost of security checks, and there was the global architecture. They had to do pen test. We had to do a lot of things just to get into the system. And we passed everything that was there, but again, we had to make a lot of configuration changes just to adhere to their security policies, their specific requirements. So that is something that we at least we are proud of, that, because we are modular enough. We are to make those changes pretty quickly, and we try to adhere to the business needs rather than incorporate or enforce something that the business may have to make changes. So it works either way. Yeah.
So I have a question for Juan, and maybe for Dino and Nolly, because we are on the other side. So we'll always be biased for what we do is best and everything. But I believe there are the transparency in the costing. So do you understand how what has been your feedback with the the costing that is quoted by some of these MLOps vendors, because that is one of the critical decision criteria. So maybe we can start with Ron, because he's been silent for a while, so we can ask him to take lead, and then maybe we come back to the Dino in the last.
Yeah, so I would like to see the screen again, because of the system. I have a question there, but I'll answer your costing first. If Sunit can maybe bring up the screen in the meantime. Look, we are an investment bank. We don't have costs, only investments. So,
good one.
So
we'll give you.
Yeah,
you can show me the savings.
Yeah.
The cost is less than that, then it's an investment. So yeah, so we don't, we don't compare on the basis of which one is the cheapest hamburger. We're looking for the appropriate meal at the right price. Okay. My question on this was, so your different models, not the components. I've got the different models. How do I know what's running in production and what's running in dev? And can I lock down my production models?
Yeah, sure. KK, if you want to take this.
Yes, let me take that. So, Rohan, the way we do it is we have a concept of promotion and, again, role-based access control. So this, what you're seeing is, think of it as a dev environment, because there are hundreds of models out here. And then you could, once you've tested them, and they match up to your requirements in terms of accuracy, and we enable you to run A/B tests, etc. as well. So once you've selected a few models, then you can mark them for promotion. So and that, again, the roles are separated. So somebody else, the developer could request promotion to, let's say, a QA environment. So it gets automatically promoted. The model would land up in QA, where it goes through your maybe user acceptance testing, maybe quality assurance, whatever you call it. Once that is done, then you can, again, a different person could promote it to a different to the production environment. So that's the way we manage the flow from dev to production. And the production environment would be a completely different instance. So there, again, it's locked down in the sense that you will not be able to do any coding out there. That's completely isolated. It's only the binaries, and you can only run the model there. You cannot actually retrain the model or anything like that.
Okay, so it is separate environments. It's not one environment where I switch contexts. Okay, that's fine. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Correct. Correct.
So I go to Nolly about the costing and the pricing, because you have already made a decision. So, what is your take? Is it the pricing is high, low, transparency, clarity? Because you have to, finally comprehend, what would be the impact, and then take a decision there.
I think because there was a group decision that was actually made. I can't really comment on the pricing. So they looked at it as for the entire bank to say that that pricing would then be acceptable. I know we do pay a yearly license, and at a head perspective. So I'm not really sure the intricacies of the costs for the platform that they decided to eventually go with. But yeah, I do know it was made at a group level and they were in agreement with the costs. So unfortunately, I can't comment on that.
Okay,
Nolly,
I'm not asking for the specific for the cost. It's only that, the transparency, because it's some players, they quote it with the infrastructure. Some go only for the pure licensing cost. So, there are different variations and, how much of computing space is needed and all those kinds of challenges. I think KK can elaborate that better. So maybe Dino, if you have any insights on is that a critical determinant in terms of, do you expect more transparency from MLOps guys on the pricing for the platforms?
I wouldn't say more transparency. The vendors that I've interacted with have been very transparent, and I found there's usually a couple of ways that they price it. It's either some sort of user-based pricing, so how many people are going to log into the system and use it, or it's based on how many models you're deploying. So do you have 50 models in production or 100 models in production, and the price scales like that? Or it's got on, it's linked to some sort of worker function. So if you are training a model, you need one worker, for example. And if you've deployed a model, you need another worker. And then depending on how many workers you need, and as you build more models and deploy more models, that your requirements of workers will increase, and so will your cost. There are a couple of vendors that I've spoken to that have like an unlimited option, so you pay one flat fee and you can then deploy their production service onto your own premise server, and you pay one fee. I mean, that makes it a little bit easier in terms of containing your costs. And I'm obviously working at a retail company, so they're very worried about costs at all times. I guess the struggle that I've always had is, because the retail is sensitive to cost, is how much do I invest into the platform we already have, so our proprietary platform, or do we make a switch to a managed platform and use a service provider and a vendor? And yeah, I guess it's also got to do with skill shortage. Can you actually find people to build that platform and maintain that platform for you? But what is the tipping point that you go one way or the other? Because if you look overseas at what some companies are doing, it seems very mixed. You've got companies like Uber, they build everything themselves. They don't see the point in using a vendor to do that, whereas other companies are using a vendor. But yeah, I would say price for a retail company is very important, as much as what is the value add of the service.
Perfect. Kiki, your take on what Dino commented about I'm missing out this point. Dino, you were talking about
the pricing structure.
Yeah, and also I think I'm just missing out because
build or buy.
Yeah, so build or buy is an age-old conundrum, right? And I think it depends on the size of the organization, the maturity. But before that, I think Nolly, you wanted to drop off, right? Because you had something else that you wanted to attend to. Thank you very much for joining us, Nolly. Pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I actually just checked. Sorry, while Dino was speaking. So we do, it is a bit expensive. It's actually the salary for one of my experienced data scientists per year, the cost that we pay. So it's one cost for the entire year, and we also pay a licensing fee. But yeah, no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care. Take care.
Thank you, Nolly. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I think build versus buy, right? I think more mature organizations can afford to build things on their own because they have, 1,300 or maybe, I don't know what your team size is, but once you've reached a certain level of maturity, you can afford, or or maybe if you're really adventurous, you can try and build something on your own. But what we've found is many organizations which are just starting off on this journey, and they can't afford the large players like AWS SageMaker or Microsoft Azure, then they are the ones who are looking for some good platform to get started with, and they don't have the bandwidth to try and build something on their own. So I think, Jaspal, that's the kind of players out there.
So in my understanding of Espresso, in fact, Rohan's views can also come in, is that, sometimes you start with somebody who it's like the first mover advantage. You stop reinventing the wheel, but in case there's a platform which is kind of an open architecture with white box functionalities, which lets you, integrate with any new feature stores, anything which is coming up new. In that case, I think it is more cost efficient to, because finally, if you are looking at, with Nolly being here, we were likely to, focus on the future of MLOps, that some things that she was interested in. But, if you start with something like, a white box open architecture kind of a platform, which is built on open source. So that itself is like, you would like to have a platform which is synonymous to a homegrown kind of a thing. And there are not many with a solution perspective who would like to allow you to do that to their platform. But I think, KK, you can correct me, but I think in our case, that flexibility comes in because, it's not a pitch actually, I'm not trying to make a pitch there. It's just that, I felt that, if I have to take a decision, or maybe Ron, if I have to take a decision, I'll always take a bet on something which is more like, because AI is an open science, the best development and the progress is always going to happen on open source. So there's no point in getting cloud native or, restricted to a particular structure. And you need people who are getting trained in those common open source platforms. So you shouldn't have a steep learning curve for a proper certification needed to be, deploying. That is not going to be easy. So that is my thought there.
Yeah, no, so from my side, I think, and thanks for that, Dino. Dino mentioned about the feature store, which I'm going to be looking into. He said Uber has got some white papers on that. Where I would buy, so coming with a system is coming with the answer. And I'm going back to my previous point. I don't know what my question is. If you come to me and say, I've got a system and we have financial models that we can propose that can run, you've got to plug in your own data, you've got to change some of the parameters and so on, but it's a good starter set to run these models. That's the company that I want to partner with. I don't really want to buy, if I want to buy software, I go to Microsoft. If I want to buy hardware, I go to AWS, or rent hardware, I guess. But for the rest of it, I'm looking for partners. Somebody that can give me some tools to help me figure out my questions and have some good idea of how to answer it. I think that's the secret sauce.
So we would have the answers. We work with companies like Capital One and the others in US. So maybe I'll take it up separately. And if you see there's an answers, we can discuss further. So that is. So now I think we are left with some 10 minutes there, and we would like our the limited attendees that we could manage to have ask any questions, so that they can also speak and we can have the answers from our speakers. Yeah, there is one.
Yes. So are we open for the Q&A? Just Mr. Jaspal?
Yeah. Ekta. We have some 5 minutes, so we'll quickly.
I think Amir has a question. Amir, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Hey, everybody.
Yes,
Amir Adams here. I am actually a data engineer. Thanks for the platform and thanks to the speakers for making the time and raising all of these good points. My question, I guess, is a little bit more in skills. So what are your thoughts? What's the panel's thoughts on the sort of dichotomy between a data scientist and a data engineer, and how that plays a part in evolving the tool set, continually evolving the tool set, the job function, and the nature of the role, as well as the work.
Okay. Dino, you'd like to take that?
I don't mind. So I used to have an opinion about this, Amir, and good to see you. I used to have an opinion that, you know, the roles were different and they needed to be defined, but more and more today, there's less focus on, you know, training and building the model, and more, it's more an engineering problem. You know, how do I actually get this model into production? So in my point of view, it's kind of just labels, because what you want to actually do is see business value and see that thing put into production. So even if you are a data scientist, you need to have a data engineering hat on at all times, because it's become so democratized in the way that you can train models. It's very easy to do that, you know. So the real value add is, like I kind of said earlier, is the pipelines around that. So how do you make sure the model is retrained? How do you make sure that the new model is pushed into deployment and into production? So yeah, it's not really an answer, but I think everyone should move more towards engineering because of the way that these systems are now set up.
Right. I absolutely agree with Dino. And I think a couple of points here. I think all of us recognize in the real world of data mining or data science, I think 70% of the work is around just data engineering. It's only 30% is the actual modeling, because more than half the time, as I said, 70%. There's a famous slide, I think, from Google, which we use quite often in our presentations, which shows the entire gamut of activities around a machine learning project, and only a small part of it is actually the modeling. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. So absolutely, models are going to be commoditized, because you know, there's going to be models for, already you find there's deep learning models for image recognition and things like that available on the internet. You can just download them and maybe tweak them a little bit and get them to work, right? So there's going to be boxes which you productionize them, etc., etc. So that's how it's going to be in future. So data engineer's role is very critical.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a different view, if I may. So I think the data scientist is in our world anyway, it's so we have data scientist roles, but it's become an overlay on many other roles. You know, in the past, you know, your sales guys would have Excel spreadsheets and build these models. You know, that's modeling. You know, it's limited data sets and so on, but it's modeling. I've sent all of my BAs on Python courses now, because I figured out they spent most of their days looking at, you know, VLOOKUPs, you know, building VLOOKUPs between spreadsheets. So I think it has become a part of everyone's job. So I see it as more of an overlay. And if you are a data scientist, I would almost recommend to focus on a specific domain so that you can understand the business. A general data scientist, I think, is dangerous. You have to understand the domain well to build appropriate models.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Rohan. So I've gone through a very good blog on this, you know, Rohan, what you're talking, and I had this in my mind to tell you before. I'll send you the link on this, and it was an excellent one. What you are trying to say is what they say, that, you know, of course, there's a technical complexity, but, you know, finally, the art element. I think there's a podcast which I think Rand Merchant Bank also has your own podcast, but KK was part of our podcast and he talked about data as an art. So, you know, maybe KK, what was that comment that you made? Data science versus data art.
I said it shouldn't be called data science, it should be called data art, because, you know, the results that you get, the model that you get, the quality of the model differs greatly. Whereas science is something that is reproducible. If I drop a ball, it's going to drop, you know, whether I have 10 years of experience or 40 years of experience. But the kind of model you'll get from a 10-year-old guy in the industry in 40 years is very different. So absolutely, the domain expertise, I think, makes a huge difference, because that's what separates the men from the boys. I mean, in some sense, absolutely.
So Amir, we have done a good job to confuse you. So in fact, what we are trying to tell you is that, the day you decide to either go on the engineering side or on the scientist, you have to become the expert. And the expertise is not able to code or, learn more languages, but, application part. If you can decode a big problem into smaller parts, of course, the solutioning would be far easy. And, that business head is always needed to, comprehend problems. There are people who understand business, but when they grew in experience, there was not enough to master the coding or the latest tools to be able to follow and play around with that, because people don't get paid for research. We get paid for the outputs that we deliver. So it's very good that there's a data scientist community who can leverage and turn around some of those research things into practical things. So I think the gap between the academic world and the practice world has been zeroed only by the technology and by the people like data scientists who have come over. So this is my thought. And any questions from anyone else? I think we are just 2 minutes away.
We have something on chat box, Jaspal, from Malibu. It's like, can we have the link as well that you have sent to Rohan? So,
yeah. So I have on my thing, but we have the email from the attendees, so maybe I can email them. Maybe a good blog. It's something which is what Rohan has been trying to say consistently. That is very, very important. So I always take comfort on the qualitative aspect. So take care on more on the technical.
Sorry, Jaspal, I'm losing you.
I don't think so there are any more questions. Okay, yeah, maybe some disruption. So we don't see any more questions. And Ekta, over to you. I would like to thank Rohan. We had a very interaction, and it was just like a very casual chit chat. So we have lived up to your expectations, and we would like to do some more interactions and define the topic more narrowly. And it just makes us, so while there are people who will come in and join and be part of it, but we would always look forward to interacting and engaging closely.
Great. No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Ekta,
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So on this note, thank you, everyone. Thank you, our partner, Expresso.ai. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Dino. And thank you, Noli. She's left, actually. So thank you, all the thought leaders, for, taking out your precious time, being here with us, and sharing your insights on the subject, and we would be connected. And we have also shared a feedback form on the chat box with all the audiences, where we have mentioned about the interest with, knowing about the solutions of Expresso. So you can highlight your interest, and we would love to connect you with the Expresso team on that. So thank you once again, everybody, and all the audiences taking out your precious time being here. And I would be sharing the video link with you by tomorrow. And please respond to our feedback forms as well. And we are also going to do series 4 and 5 with Expresso on the topics, similar topics. So please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the various updates. So thank you, all the thought leaders once again, and the audiences for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye. Good night. Stay safe.
Good night.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.